Greetings from Chicagoland. You're listening to Munira's Musings, where your host Munira will showcase new guests each week to share exciting details about the journey to their niches. As we like to say, the riches are in the niches. And on this show, we'll share ideas on how to break through our invisible boundaries so we can start taking steps towards our dreams and create the life that we most desire. If you're passionate about impacting lives, then this podcast will give you some great ideas and equip you with the tools to quickly grow your business. Okay, let's get started with today's show. Here's your host, Munira.
Greetings from Chicagoland. This is Munira, the Niche Navigator, coming to you live with another guest, a special guest who helps you become the top 1% in your sales game. Now, everybody here who is listening is in business and you want to learn how to sell. So our guest is here all the way from New Hampshire, Doug C. Brown. Welcome, Doug. Welcome to Munira's Musings.
Thank you, Munira. I'm very grateful to be here today.
Thank you. So we bring this show, ladies and gentlemen, to you because we have seen that looking at other people's accolades, looking at other people's history, we don't feel left out. Entrepreneurship is a business where we have to kind of a little bit struggle, and we are a person who wears many hats. One of the biggest hurdles that we have is to sell, and most of us don't sell correctly. Our guest here is going to share his story to his niche, and he's going to share a few tips with us. So Doug, welcome to our show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I moved to New Hampshire from Massachusetts, where I grew up. I started working at the age of 3 for my father's business. And by the age of 5.5, we were kind of groomed to sell. We were brought out and we were selling. My father had an electric motor machinery repair company, and we were selling repair jobs in motors and all kinds of things. It was a family business, and my family helped me through. Obviously, I'm only 5-6 years old, but what really hit me during that period of time, because I can still remember it today, is we used to take something and we'd pay something for it, and then we'd double the cost and sell it. And so if we had something for $10, we'd sell it for 20. And, back then, I'm 61. So back then I was making 50 cents an hour, which, was amazing. That was awesome back then for me. But I could see, if we sold 20 things in a day, we made $100 profit, and I only worked 8 hours. So I made $4. So something had to be to this game of selling something, that's kind of what got into my brain. And so I just never really stopped that from, that age. Kind of went through different businesses and had different companies that as I was growing up. And, to date, I've done over 36 of them. And, we've always been selling. So from, that age all the way up, that's how I learned how to sell. On a personal level, I have a wife and 2 daughters, and they work in my company and as well along with me. And, I love things like hockey. Professional hockey is kind of my sport to go to. I love the Boston Bruins. I'm from New Hampshire, so that's our team. So all of you non-Bruins fans out there, sorry. But that's I love to travel. And I was a professional musician for a long time as well, so playing in bands and a professional DJ. So those are kind of my hobbies, and I still work today. I love to work. You'll probably find me in my office at the end of my life, because that's what I love to do, and I love to teach people and help people to go from A to B, B to C, C to D, and so on, and help them understand how to think and act like a 1% sales earner. So if they want to be a 1% sales earner, they can too.
Okay, so you said a lot of things. So let's go back to when you were 3 years old and you were in your father's company. What exactly were you selling?
So think of industrial equipment. If you ever went into a factory, or you went to an amusement ride, let's say, right? Those amusement rides are run by electric motors.
Right.
So sometimes those things don't make it. They burn out, what we used to call burnout. And we'd have to replace them, or replace parts, or replace the motors themselves, or do what they called a rewind, which was they have copper inners. So you'd go in and take the old wiring out and put the old wiring in. And so that's what my dad's company used to do, is we would repair those motors, or we would repair the machinery, the industrial machinery itself, or a combination of both, big compressors and generators and all kinds of wildly interesting things. So we'd repair those, but those required parts. And so that's what I was doing. I was working on what is the repair cost, and what are the parts, and how do I sell those?
So 3 years old, you knew which part was needed.
No, not at 3. At 3, I started sweeping floors.
Okay.
At about 5.5 to 6, that's where, because they were teaching me all the way through. So about 5.5 to 6, if somebody said I needed a motor switch, I knew what that meant, or I needed a capacitor, I knew what that meant. So then from there, they taught me, okay, there's, 50 different capacitors, and they break down into, 2 or 3 categories. And so I would learn that as I started going. And when I was selling things, it was a family business. So there were 14 of us there. So either my grandparents were there, and my father was there, or some of the people we hired outside the family were there, and they were teaching me and grooming me through the thing. And anytime my dad went on a job, because people used to call him, and he'd go out and he'd do work or consulting work, I would go with him. And so, I got to hang out with my father, most of my young adult life, my young child's life, when I wasn't playing with my friends. And we did the same with all my brothers. So I have 3 older brothers. It was just kind of what we did in the family.
So one thing that comes to mind, my father also was a businessman, and he was an indentor. He was always a middleman between the company somewhere else and the customer here. And when he talked business, we were supposed to sit on the side. We were never part of it. We never listening to the conversation. Yeah. So that wasn't something that you were doing, because kind of the same age, but as I was growing up, children were to be seen, not heard. Right. But you were part of it. How did that make you feel now?
It was great. I did the same thing with my kids, right? So, I used to be, for example, at one time I was an independent president of training and sales for Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes, who they had a training company. And I would bring my kids to everything that I could, right? So they would be in Tony Robbins events and meeting people like that when they were young. I brought them to their first tax seminar when they were 5 years old. They were bored out of their mind, but even today they remember being there, and so some of this stuff sinks in. As if I would travel to Europe on business, they would come with me. They were on the payroll early on in their lives. And the reason I did it, I think, was probably because my dad taught me that. And what I realized as I got older is, even if I didn't go into my dad's business, that I would remember these lessons. You may remember, listening as we're sitting there listening, and we're hearing investors talk, or we're hearing bankers talk, or we're hearing somebody talk about business. And especially if it's repetitive, even though we don't catch the lesson early, say when we're 5 or 6 or 7, because it doesn't have a lot of relevance at that point. It's even if it's boring, because a lot of times when I was sitting listening to the bank president talk to my father, I'd be like, oh gosh, I'd rather be outside playing, but later on, some of the words and the ratios and the numbers and things and all of that, later on when I had to deal with that, it started to make sense to me quicker than before, because it's kind of like learning a language in some ways. And, as a young child, that's the best time to learn a language, because, we're open mind and open book. So I don't know if that happened for you, but I know for me that definitely happened. And I felt great because, every once in a while, as I started getting older, it paid off for me in the terms of, the adults would recognize who I was. So, I was able to get my first business loan when I was 13 years old, because the bank president at the time knew who I was, and they gave me that and a credit line. And of course I had to have my oldest brother sign the dotted line with me because he was 18, but still, how many kids at 13 years old get recognized by the bank? And, so it did pay off, I think.
So I think the reputation, right? If you're in that realm, and
Right.
I have grandkids and I talk about my business all the time and they are always around me, and now they are so in tuned.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, okay, they can repeat word for word what I'm going to say. And it's so much fun. But my father didn't do that to us because we were supposed to sit away and just be seen. So I wasn't privy to all of the conversations. So I wish he had done that. So you said that you had 36 businesses. Now, did
Mhm.
you start 36? So what business did you start at 13 that you took a loan for? And what are the other 36? Have you ever worked for corporate America?
So the answer is yes to have I worked for corporate America. And I always had, when I was growing up, I always had side businesses. So they were smaller, I'd get them to maybe multi-six-figure businesses, but when you go into college and you're running a multi-six-figure business, it's not that big of, bad of a deal really. And so, yeah, the one when I was 13 actually was a band. We actually were professional. I was playing, what happened was I got asked to be in a band, but all the band members were well over. I was only 13, but I was a really good keyboard player back then. So I wanted to be in this band because I wanted to make money and I wanted to be able to play music. And so we needed a sound system and we needed some equipment. So I was able to use my contacts to go get that, to actually buy my way into the band. And so we had a music business that we would go out and we'd get paid for, playing. So that was one of my little side hustles, right? In my life, I had a DJ business. That was a little side hustle for me. But, I was netting down 60,000 a year part-time as a DJ, so it was kind of like, I had lots of little small businesses when I was growing up because, it's really hard to go get big loans or big investments or, even be taken seriously when you're 17 years old in certain ventures, right? It's just like you're not mature enough based in the political or public eye to be able to handle, selling, real estate or something like that, right? So you had to make it up. And that's what I did before I was 18. And then after I was 18, I built, telecommunications companies, consulting companies, fisheries businesses, different types of business. I had a Christmas tree wholesaling, a retail business. I've had numerous businesses, and they've all not really related to one another because I was always trying to try something new, whether, be a restaurant or whatever it might be. And then, a couple of them did really well. And I was part of teams building some that did great. One actually sold off for $2 billion. So that was a good one to be involved in, and I had a lot of businesses that didn't do well either. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people think, you do one business, you're successful at that. And then you do another business, you're not, you're successful continuously. And that's not the way business works. You're going to have your setbacks. We've had setbacks. I've had setbacks. I've made millions and millions of dollars in businesses, and I've lost, sometimes hundreds of thousands or sometimes even millions of dollars in businesses. But the reality is you learn from each mistake and you keep going. And that's what I've learned. As you learn, you just don't repeat the mistake again. And that's how it's been. So, and, for corporate America, that's really, I never knew, it's kind of funny, but growing up working for myself most of my life, I never really thought about a professional sales job, even though I was doing sales. And while I was going through college, I had some small businesses, but I also worked for a company that sold musical equipment. And I was a salesperson there, but you don't think of yourself as a salesperson because, you're waking up, you're playing with musicians and you're going out and you're playing in clubs, you just don't think about it. But, I was selling music equipment to Aerosmith, Billy Joel's band, the Eagles, Boston, a lot of famous bands, Extreme, a lot of the bands that we listened to on the radio at the time, or we bought CDs at the time, they were people I dealt with on a weekly basis, right? And so when I went to college and I got out of college, I had started another company while I was in college, and I was thinking, I really need to get myself into something that is more stable than an entrepreneur's life at that moment. And so what I did is I went back and finished school. And when I got out of school, I couldn't find a job. I had degrees in nuclear medicine. I had degrees in the medical field, and I couldn't find a job. So I went to take a sales job because I was like, okay, well, I think I can handle this. And I immediately excelled in those ranks and became the number one representative in the company out of 322 reps in that company. And I never looked back from selling at that point. So I've always had other businesses as I've gone along. And some of them have been sales driven companies. I still own a company today that we'll recruit sales teams and bring them into a company for full commission and sell in the back end, for corporate or training or whatever industry it is.
So you figured out your niche on selling, but selling is such a scary word for lots of people. They just cringe. Why is it? Why are people so afraid of it?
Well, I think it's training like anything, right? So, we as human beings are trained at a very young age what we're supposed to believe and think. So, and I think too, there are some people in the sales industry which give the sales industry a bad reputation, right? So they sell at any cost. They don't really play win-win. They do unscrupulous things that they shouldn't do. They lie to people, quite frankly, really, when it comes down to it. So when you think about, I think that those are two things. And I also think three, that a lot of people who don't understand sales are jealous of the amount of money that people make in selling. And so, you look at the one, if we start with the first point, when we're taught, there's an old joke that says 3 babies are born. And, the first one says, my child's going to be, parents say, my child's going to be a doctor. The next one says, my child is going to be a lawyer. The next one says, my child is going to be a salesman. And a pin drops in the hospital and everybody looks at this person because they're like, why would you do that to your child, right? So that's because of the old stereotype of, in the old days when people used to, especially, or even today, when they try to do manipulative things. So sales is really simple. It's communication. It's communicating between one or more parties. And I say one or more because sometimes we're selling ourselves, right? In fact, we're selling ourselves on a daily basis. Right. And it can be something as easy as you have two tubes of toothpaste in your bathroom and, which one do I choose today, right? That's a sale. You're having a conversation in your head and we're going, okay, I think this one benefits me more. I'll buy that. There's no exchange of money, but there's an exchange of value, which is your energy and time to get the toothpaste out of the toothpaste, get the cap off and get it onto your toothbrush. And so that's a sale. Now, albeit not somebody would think it's a sale, but we are selling each other as human beings all the time, back and forth in relationships. I don't mean selling human beings. I mean literally selling us on each relationships with one another. If you have any type of relationship, whether it be a significant other, or, a family member, you are selling on a regular basis to keep that relationship together.
Yes.
Right. So selling is human. We've been doing it forever. And so I think that's the main reason that, just like a bad relationship, if you get, if you're dating and you're getting in a string of bad relationships, you go, oh no, not another relationship. I don't want one of those. Well, I think people do the same thing with salespeople. And I think that people don't go into that field because of that, because they are learning techniques and things that, quite frankly, could be used for good or not. But, as long as you play good, sales is the most noble job I know of, because, this is somebody that was going to be a doctor saying this, because you get to help people with problems. You get to help people who have some problems, who they want an opportunity to gain, or you're able to help them by innovating on something that is very important to them so that they can actually resolve it for the greater good in a lot of ways, and certainly for the individual good. So if you think about it, nothing that we have today, this podcast wouldn't be here today without somebody selling the microphone you're using, without somebody selling the computer systems we're using, and, the person who sold the microphone, that wouldn't have been built if somebody didn't sell the components to that. And that wouldn't have been able to be sold if we didn't break it down even further, that some engineer didn't, sell the idea of the components to someone else, right? So there's a long chain of sales that are happening just in the microphone that we're using, or the plant that you have behind you, right? Or whatever. And so everything is moving, and it's a daily thing of sales, no matter what it is. The question is, how do you do this ethically and make a ton of money doing it and play win-win? I teach people how to play win-win, preferably win-win-win. The person wins, we win because we get paid, and it benefits someone else. Because if you think about it, when we're selling, if we're selling an automobile, for example, and that's like the used car salesperson, that's, but there's a lot of ethical salespeople in the automotive industry as well. But if we sell the vehicle at the right to the right person for the right situation, then how much joy comes out of that automobile for not just that person who bought it, but their friends, their family. They get to go see things and learn new places and understand things that they never would have been able to experience without that vehicle. And so all of this translates into selling. And if it's done right, selling is, to me, the most beneficial and noble pursuit of any career that one could have. And we're selling all the time anyways. If we're an engineer, we're selling ourselves into the engineering job, So we're all using sales. We just don't call it that, but it's really communication between one or more people to actually come to the greater good to resolve a problem or challenge or gain an opportunity.
So this is really interesting. So thank you so much. But again, we are short of time. But let me ask you this. You teach people how to be top 1%. How does that work?
So it's through a series of training. Anyone can learn how to be a 1% earner. It's a skill, like any skill. I want to dismiss the myth that dispel the myth that people are born salespeople or they're not. It's true. Some people are born musicians. Some people are born architects, right? But for the majority of people, it's a learned skill. And certainly as being in a 1% earner's capacity, which is, in the top 1% of someone's geographical area, amongst all professions, not just sales earners, that is a skill that's learned just like any professional sport is learned. Very few people came out to be Michael Jordan without practicing all the time and learning new skills. So what we do is we teach people how to think, how to act. In the nuts and bolts of that, we start in the beginning with, why are we doing this? And what's the clear plan of getting there? we break that down into the steps for people. We train them on the skills. We train them on how to think this way because it requires a shift in thought. And we teach them how to employ leverage and selling leverage in their daily life and how to put it into a system and how to talk with people in any situation. Because if we're talking to a CEO of a very large company, for example, that conversation is going to be different than if you were talking with a person who had a small company, a local, like I have a company down the street, they sell pianos, right? They've been doing it successfully for, almost 100 years. But that conversation with that person there there's a different need there than somebody who's running a $5 billion corporation. There's going to be a different conversation. So we teach and we work together and we train together and we do live exercises together so that they bring their level of confidence in their mindset up to that place where they know how to handle any situation.
It's awesome. So what are the 3 takeaway points that my audience should take from you today?
Well, depending on where they are in their process, if they're beginning new and thinking about selling, that number one would be that selling is a truly noble place to enter. Now, if they're in business today and they want to increase their revenues and their profits, the number one thing they have to look at is how often are they actually consistently prospecting. So it's about massively prospecting to the right target buyers. So the second thing would be, are you actually clear on your right target buyers?
Your niche avatar.
Yeah, well, the actual ideal buyer within the avatar, right? So there can be an avatar, and that avatar is great to get us in there. But who's the actual buyer? And are we talking to the buyer more than we're talking to influencers? Because what I have found in most people selling is they're not talking to the person who can actually give them the money. I don't mean the person who actually carries the check from point A to B. I mean the actual decision and the buyer, the one who appropriates the funds.
Okay.
And so the third thing that I would say is play win-win. Too many people are because, and they play win-lose a lot of times, Marian, in the capacity of they don't have enough prospects to actually talk to. So they go into scarcity mode. And that's one of the reasons I'm saying to companies, right now is the best time to put the pedal down on doubling down on the prospecting side of your business, because the economy, the way it's shifted and the way that sales has shifted from almost to virtual selling today, not 100%, obviously, but it's shifted along a lot more than it has in the past. People are confused about what to do. And what they do when they fear things is they generally pull back. When the economy is a little tight, they generally pull back. And, I was seeing on the news last night that more people have pulled out money now in their 401ks and their investment funds in the second quarter of this year than they have almost in history, right? It's up 36% from the year following, but everybody is still spending a ton of money. So what that means is people are going to have less money in the near future to have the income to be able to do certain things. That's what the whole process was about on television. So assuming that's true, this means that generally people will start to make buying decisions differently. And the people who are selling, unfortunately, when it gets kind of tough, because many people are, don't want to be rejected, so to speak, is that they'll tend to pull back on their selling. So if you own a company today, I'd ask you to take a good look at this. And instead of pulling back on your selling, double down on your prospecting and selling, because when the economy swings back, because it always does, I'm 61 years old. I mean, it's done this multiple times in my lifetime. You'll be positioned as the number one player because you've been there in the downtimes as much as the uptime.
Oh, okay. Got it. This is such an interesting conversation because not a lot of people on my show are sellers, right? Although they are in business and are entrepreneurs, they never talk about selling. And you've touched a lot of points already, giving us a lot of light on this. One more question is that you've built multi businesses and you're pretty much well on your way. Why is this important to you?
To continue to keep building, or why
No,
was it?
this particular subject of selling. Why is this important?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a wonderful question. You know, the real, the absolute truth is, I didn't know what I was doing when I started out. Like, I didn't know what my dad was doing. I didn't even know. I still don't know today if my father actually was doing this to teach us. My dad passed on early. I never got to ask him, did you do this to teach us lessons, or did you get low cost labor, or or both, or did you not even think about it? It was just kind of something that happened. But what I've learned along the way is that no matter what, and I've taught my daughters this, no matter what, if you know how to sell, you will never be out of money. You will never have, you'll have fearful moments like we all do as we grow up, like, oh my gosh, I've overextended myself on, in my case, maybe a business, or, the business took a downturn or whatever, right? But as long as you know you can go out there and generate a 6-figure plus income, even if you had to do it by yourself, starting today, if they drop me anywhere in the world that I could speak the language, and maybe not even if I could speak the language, I can still communicate, I know I'm going to be okay. You know what I mean? So I want to be able to give that level of confidence to people, transfer that, as one thing, as you get a bit older in life, and, your homes are paid off and the cars are paid off and you got ample money in the bank and all that stuff, which I'm very grateful for. We start to think of, okay, I'm on the last third of life, or the last, quarter of life, hopefully the last, the last half of life, right? And I'll live another 60 plus years. But we start to think about, how do I transfer all of this wisdom and knowledge that I've gained over my life and give it to other people so that they can improve their lives now, that they can in turn improve other people's lives. So it's really more of a giving back thing, or a legacy thing for me. And that's why, in the academy that we have, the 1% Academy and things like, we made it affordable so anyone can actually do it. Of course, it's not free, but, we're running a business as well. So it's really now more for me to be able to give back to people, because I've taught people that, like, I had one gentleman that he was doing fine. He was making $140,000 a year. But in his first year, he went from $140,000 a year to $2.1 million a year in commissions. That changed his life, and it's changed his legacy. I've had people who were selling programs and services in the training industry for, $15,000. I remember one lady sold her first deal out was $300,000. It changed her world, because that level of confidence, once, the expanded mind can never contract. Even if we wanted to, it can't. You're on a different level of thought. And it's just really about quality of life. So I'm really looking to give people the opportunity of quality of life. And one thing that's bothering me tremendously now, because I'm not in that position, but I can see it happening, is people are old, getting up in their 40s and 50s. They're saying things like, I don't want to be in this job, stuck in this job anymore. Or I'm even selling. I don't want to be stuck in a corporate job anymore. I want to be out on my own. But a lot of these people can't, because they have such high overhead and can't extract out. And as they start to get to retirement, what's really bothering me is half the Americans don't have savings accounts. And I've run the numbers. They're going to run out of money if they stop on their 401ks and everything, their home and all that. They run out of money within 8 to 12 years. So if somebody's going to retire at, say, 65, and they run out of money at 75, if they're going to live to 85 or 90 or, beyond, what are they going to do? So if I can teach them how to sell, because the cool thing about commission sales is it doesn't discriminate on age, race, creed, it doesn't. Because if we can learn how to sell, then as people get older, they don't have to go take jobs for an hourly wage. They can make an extra $75,000 to $100,000 a year and still have that quality of life in retirement, or 150 or 250 or 500, whatever they want to make. They can do that selling even at 75 to 80 years old. And so you can continue your quality of life even post. To me, that's a noble pursuit to help people, because that changes legacies, because now they can do things for their grandchildren and their children and things that they couldn't do in their retirement.
That's, what you speak to the mind. I mean, you're speaking to a lot of people here, because people are quite worried. And when we were young, when I came to America, nobody taught me about 401k or let's do something here.
Sure.
And that's something that now people are a lot aware of, but we didn't know, right? So as awareness sets in, you need to figure out how to sell. And that's the biggest thing. It's like your business is doing very well, but you want to take it up a notch. So ladies and gentlemen, this is amazing. This is a wonderful conversation, because 1% will be the 1%, the top 1% academy that Doug has built is teaching you how to sell. And one thing that really resonates with me right now is the fact that if you know how to sell, you can be dropped off anywhere. Wasn't Grant Cardone doing that, or one of the influencers out there? He was being dropped everywhere, and then he had to make money, and he had nothing. Wasn't that a show somewhere? I think.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like, if it wasn't, I don't recall who it is, but that sounds like Grant, right? So that sounds like something Grant would be able to, because Grant does things like that. And yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing, that selling is the great equalizer. Selling, and I mean, you're a lady. I know this about women. They get paid less than men in the fields that they work. I think it's wrong, right? But the one place that they can level this playing field is selling, because there's no separate commission structure for he, she, or they, right? There's no separate commission structure. If the company's paying 30% percentage or 25% percentage for that sale of that, whoever brings the sale in gets paid. Now, if it's a full commission and no one's on salary, and by the way, women generally are better sellers than men. And I can hear all the men going, what are you talking about? But no, they're generally better sellers than men, because they listen better. They're more in tune and intuitive. Just because they're, moms, right? That's what the nature equipped them to be. So they're generally more empathetic, and they're far more patient. And so women generally can do better than men in selling. And so it's the great leveler, because, I wanted to teach my daughters these traits, because as dad grows older and something happens to dad, I want them to be able to stand on their own, right? And so selling is the great equalizer in any job or any business, because whoever outsells the other individual is who gets the money.
You're right. So Doug, where do people find you?
Well, they can find, can I give a gift away to your audience?
Sure.
So I just finished up an ebook on the philosophy and psychology of what it is to be a 1% earner. Because a lot of people think, they're, my gosh, people, you're so, clear about what you say. Well, I wasn't when I first started out, right? And most people aren't. So I wrote a book teaching people that, anyone can do this. And here's the why and how of achieving that. I call it the nonstop 1% earner. And they can get the ebook at www.ceosalesstrategies.com. CEO-sales.com/1 P as in Paul and E as in Echo. So that's 1% earner. So CEO-salesstrategies.com/1 PE, the number one. And they can get a hold of me if they want to communicate via email. I ask them to send an email into YouMatter, YOUMATTER, at CEOsalesstrategies.com. And I put that URL, together because, you do matter to us, no matter who you are, where you're from, or what you do. We answer all inquiries that come in. I have a team of people that monitor that. And certainly, I answer those as well. Or they can hit me up on LinkedIn if they wanted, Doug Brown 123. And of course, the URL is CEOsalesstrategies.com.
That's awesome. So this ebook is about the how and why that you should be a top 1% then?
Yeah, and what 1% people do differently, the earners do differently than, say, a top producer or an average producer in selling. So, and quite frankly, it's not hugely different, but it is something in which they're creating a system of leverage throughout the process, and they're doing things slightly different. And it explains what they do in the book and how somebody can apply this. And then, of course, in the ebook, there's the 1% Academy offer, so they can look at that and they say, hey, I'd like to get on the waiting list for the 1% Academy if they want to do that, or they can get on the waiting list if they just want to email into us on the 1% Academy, which we're running fourth quarter this year. We're starting up again on that. So if they're interested in something of that nature, they certainly can, that. And that's not a give me. We do interview them. We make sure it's the right fit. We're looking for people certainly who are open and coachable, right? If they're not open and coachable, it's hard to teach anybody anything. But as long as that's the case, then, we could talk through it. And if it makes sense, then we'll invite them there and we'll help them over the next 6 to 12 months, get to where they want to be. And that's the thing too. The funny part is you could have no experience. And I've done this with people who have no sales experience whatsoever. It usually takes about a year to 2 years for them to really, really get it. But in their first 3 to 6 months, they're out selling and making sales in a big way. So it's just a matter of doing the right things in the right order with the right people. And we get very clear on that in the beginning.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being on my show, ladies and gentlemen. Doug C. Brown.
Thank you, Munira. I'm very grateful.
We bring guests here. Sometimes we don't even, they tell us in their bio what they are doing, but sometimes it really takes a conversation, learning about people. And that's what he's talking about, because if you don't know your client or the person you're selling to, or you don't have a conversation, you can't make that sell. So you need to know. And he just sold me on his ebook. Excuse me. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, take the first step and learn, take the hints that he's talking about. And he's talking about play to win. Go ahead, find Doug C. Brown, connect with him. If you like what he has to say, he has a lot more knowledge on that. And if you like our channel, go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to the folks, because we'll bring you another guest next week that's going to blow your mind. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Doug. Have a good day. Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Munira's Musings. We hope that you found today's conversation inspiring and useful, so that you can continue making progress towards mastering your own niche. Please tune in next week for another episode, and in the meantime, you can follow us on social media at Munira's Musings on Facebook, and leave us a review wherever you're listening to podcasts. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.